so that, you know, others who are maybe not here now can benefit from this. So very real and very good question. You know, the change in paradigm has been difficult for many because everybody has different learning styles, and some people are just not inclined to learn online. And there's, you know, there's absolutely, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. The sad part is now that everybody's been forced to do this, so it works for some and not for others. Part of why I'm doing, I guess, live or whatever you want to call it, lessons, is because I know that sometimes you just need someone to explain stuff to you in real time. So as it relates to are people struggling and what happens if you do poorly on a test, yes, I've had, you know, I've had students contacting me saying they're struggling with, you know, whether it be the volume of work or the amount of things they have to do with online, and maybe not being able to get as much support as they normally would. For our class, which is really all that I can speak to, what I have done, and we'll go through this, and I mean, I normally do this anyways, obviously, to give you the sheet, and I'll go in detail for everything that you're expected to know for the test. I'll also go over the homework for chapter 13 today, but more so than that, my usual practice, and it's been this way in the past, is that if you do better on the final exam than your lowest test grade, I always drop the lowest test grade. So at least that hopefully gives some hope, you know, that if you bomb one of the two tests, you know, God forbid, I hope no one bombs anything, but if you bomb one of the two tests that we have, you can still make up for it in the final, and that test can go away. The other thing I'll say is, I did lengthen the amount of time that you guys have to almost a ridiculously long amount of time. The quiz is only 10 questions, but you have 2 hours to do it. Normally you would only have 1 hour. And the test is written to take 2 hours. I normally give 3 hours, but I extended it to 4 hours. So I'm hoping that you know, situation will also maybe mitigate people kind of freaking out or whatever because they're running out of time. If something happens while you're taking the test, like you accidentally close out of the thing, or your internet goes down, or you get shut out of something, or, you know, there was some error in Wiley maybe that is causing the thing to show up as not being correct, but it's actually correct. My practice has always been to review the situation, and if need be, I'll reopen the test for the person to be able to finish. What I will say though is that, you know, you just be careful, please do study. I know these tests almost to some extent equate to, in a way, open book, because, you know, you're home, you can have notes near to you, you can have the textbook open or whatever, but you still just want to make sure that you're studying enough so that you don't get frazzled while you're doing the work. And feeling like you know, are wasting time paging around trying to find answers. I hope that provides some insight for our class as to how you could mitigate some of your concerns. You know, the other thing that I will say, and this is of course only in the event of extreme situations, is that students can withdraw from any course up to the last day of class, which is June the 4th, and still just have a W grade. That's very unusual. Normally the withdrawal would be sometime in early May, but they're extending it for the whole semester. So, you know, Tuba, to your point about what if we're really struggling and we don't know, you know, how to navigate this. If you really feel at the end that you are borderline with one of your classes, of course you have to consider financial aid and all of that, but you may want to think, you know, and by you, I mean all of us, think about what makes sense strategically. And then the other thing, and I saw someone asking about this it's privately to me, but asking in the chat, for the semester, is it pass, fail, or what's going on? So just to reiterate what I said in the previous class before we went off on the break, if every class will have a letter grade. So Tuba, if you get an A, in this class, you've got your A, you're done, right? You probably don't want to negotiate that. That's the grade that you want, or, so, but let's say something goes crazy and, your class is overwhelming and you end up maybe getting a C or a C minus or some grade that you don't want, or even a B. I mean, people have different standards, but let's just say you get a grade that you don't want. What CUNY has put in place is that you can actually request from the last day, and yeah, I'll actually try to share my screen and show you. Oh, you know what? I don't know if the academic, never mind. I don't know if the academic calendar is there, but we also have this on the CUNY website. You can choose to do a credit or no credit. That's your choice. In fact, I think it's important enough, because I feel like I explained this, but I can also believe that it's very difficult for people to know what's happening. So let me just see where I placed this. 1 second. Oh, it's in my, the link is in my first year seminar class. Just bear with me. So over here, there's some new policies from CUNY. I just want to cover this because even I found it somewhat confusing when I read it the first time. And I'll put this link up on our Zoom stuff as well. So basically what CUNY is saying is that the Board of Trustees, which is basically the people in charge of CUNY, decided that there could be a credit or no credit grading policy. And basically, whatever letter grade you get from A through F, you have the option to convert that grade to credit or no credit grading. So basically what you're saying is that if you are not, I guess, happy with the grade that you are getting, you can choose to make it not count. You would have completed the class, but you would choose for it not to impact your GPA, and that class would still transfer within CUNY. So let's say you get a C and you're not feeling that great about the C, you don't want it to impact your GPA negatively. So then you can choose, excuse me, you can choose to just change it to a CR, which means you get credit for completing the class, but that grade is not going to impact your GPA. Is this making sense, guys? I'm asking because this is actually a very confusing, confusing concept.
It is actually.
It's making sense, or it's confusing?
It does make sense at some point.
Okay. So yeah, so basically that's I guess, if you want to call it, the option that they're giving us, is to say, keep going. We know it's hard. It's not maybe possible to excel in everything, but know that at the end, you could, up to and including June 4th, you could withdraw and get a W grade, or you could push through and get a letter grade. And if you're not satisfied with a letter grade, you can change anything A through D to be credit. So you would have finished the class. It won't impact your GPA, but those classes will only transfer within CUNY. Or if you get an F, you can change it to no credit, and the F won't impact your GPA either. And if you were on academic probation at the beginning of the semester, you will, even if you do poorly in the semester and you don't get up to the point, that you were supposed to get to, you will not be dismissed from the school because of your academic standing. It's almost like, in a way, for people who are on academic probation, you can say in a way that the semester is it will count positively, obviously, if you do well, but if you don't do well, they're not gonna let it count negatively and result in dismissal or something. And then, like I said, for us, LaGuardia, June 4th is the last day to withdraw from classes. Just remember, if you want to do this credit, no credit business, then you only have basically 4 weeks from the last day that people hand in grades to apply for the option with the registrar. You can't just assume that someone's going to do it for you. You actually have to do it. You actually have to do it yourself. So I think our last day, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if they've updated the academic. I know the academic calendar has been updated, but I'm not sure if the updated one is on the LaGuardia website. But basically we finish on, by finish I mean the last day for faculty to put in any grades is June the 15th. So you have 20 business days from there, which takes you to July the 16th. That's the last day to file for credit or no credit. I do not recommend that you wait that long. You will probably already know by June the 16th or 17th what your grades are, so then you can decide how you want to proceed. Oh, in fact, excuse me, you can already start from June the 6th to file credit, no credit. How's that, Tuba? I hope I didn't talk your ear off.
I mean, I am okay with it, but the only thing that I was just thinking that, you know, how this is like my last semester, and right now, well, I was pushing myself to take 7 classes, and I am taking 7 classes.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot of classes, yeah.
But now everything is going online, so I'm kind of like struggling almost with every other class. So that's the only reason why I was asking that question, just to be sure.
Right, and have you spoken to the professors in the other classes? I mean, are there supports available, tutoring?
I haven't yet, because you know, like before going to the spring break, I have a couple of tests, and then based on the test, I figured out how like where I am in classes. So that's the only reason why I was just asking, because for this class I didn't have the test yet.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, and it's coming up, so yeah.
That's the only
All
reason
right.
I was asking.
All right, so we can reassess when you, after you took the test.
Yeah,
the
I have to
test,
see where I am in the class after I
yeah,
take the test.
yeah. And are you already accepted somewhere at another school where you have to start in August, or do you have
Yes,
the flip?
I applied for a lot of schools and I got accepted, but you know, the only thing is I cannot afford to drop even a class.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking, because because the problem with LaGuardia summer semester is that it runs into, well, no, actually you can, yeah, well, it depends on your application condition,
So
your acceptance conditions, because theoretically, if something goes completely sideways, you should be able to take that class again in spring 2, because our spring 2 ends in the second week of August, and the 4-year schools only start at the end of August.
yeah, so I hope I
Okay.
don't have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, if you once we've done our test, you're welcome to come to my office hours and we can talk this through more. Maybe you can line up for me which classes you have and we can see what's available. Remember, everybody, registration for the fall starts on April the 23rd. April the 23rd. That's this, what now, Thursday. So hopefully by now, if you are still needing to continue with classes, you're not graduating or whatever, then you please get your act together and make sure you know which classes you want to take in fall 1 and 2, so that you can also register. I know that many things are up in the air, and Aaron's even asking, is the fall semester going to be online too? In the same thing that I just showed you, the guidance document that was talking about credit, no credit, they said, and you guys know this already, summer is definitely online, but there's still awaiting decisions about the fall. I mean, it's up in the air because it depends on how, the pandemic goes, and what we're allowed to do. It's really, I think people want to go back. It's not that, trust me, most people don't want to be online only, but it's just up to whether we're actually allowed to gather in groups these sizes. That's the issue. And of course, with a institute of higher education, you can't just say, oh, on the day before classes start, that we're going to start tomorrow. These decisions have to be taken weeks or months in advance, so it's difficult to know. I bet during spring 2 we'll have more information, Aaron, about fall semester being online. I really do think that the college is trying to push for us to go back to face-to-face, but LaGuardia is part of a broader college system. So if CUNY as a whole decides that fall is online, then we have to obey the rules. But as soon as I know anything, I'll let you guys know. Someone also asked, when I transfer and they want accounting too, don't have to take another class of accounting. If you're talking about the credit and no credit thing, let's say you take just credit and not a letter. If you fail the class, you'll have to take the class again. I mean, let's be clear, this isn't like a free for all where if you fail classes, you can now suddenly get credit for it. But if you have a letter grade A through D and it just says that you have credit for it, if you're transferring within CUNY, the way the rules have been written is that the CUNY school is supposed to accept that class for transfer. And what's interesting about that is normally only a C or above will transfer. So if you do get a lower grade than a C, it's possible that if you change it just to CR, to credit, you may be able to transfer in a class that, where you actually have a quote unquote low grade. All right, so that's from Christania and Aaron. I hope I'm answering your questions. And then, yeah, Tuba, I think, I'm happy to sit with you and strategize. I do a lot of advising for the first year seminar. So, I mean, I do understand the curriculum, and maybe there's a way that I can help you to find answers in the midst of the 7 classes that you're taking. All right?
Miss, this is Debbie. I have a question.
Okay. Yeah, Debbie.
Okay, for one of my classes, right, something concerning Blackboard. So on Blackboard, like how so basically I submitted a midterm on Blackboard for my other class. And the thing is, when you submit something, they don't allow you to start a new submission. So once it submits, that's it.
Yeah,
so now
okay.
The thing is, so like how you could submit it through like text submission, and the other one is like you upload it from a file.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the text submission was the right one, but now the one I uploaded was the incorrect file. So now I reached out to the teacher on email, on Gmail, and it says that her address had permanent fatal errors. So like the thing is like there's no way to reaching out to her, no number, nothing.
Is this person in business?
It's an urban sociology class.
So it's what, Janet Michello? Who's your professor?
Yes, Janet Michello. There you go. And I tried to email her, and I'm stressed out because it's a midterm, and I know I'm going to get a good grade for it.
So she didn't give you unlimited submissions on Blackboard, just one submission, right?
Yeah, it was for the midterm. I had two parts. Like the first one, I submitted everything right, but this one, the one that was as a text submission was the correct one. But on the other one that was the uploading as a document, it was incorrect, the incorrect file.
And did you try to contact her on a LaGuardia email?
No, the thing is I cannot log into my LaGuardia email. I don't know what happened. I've been trying like over time.
And did you contact the help desk?
So I have to go back to like Outlook and like try to
Okay. What about if you go into my LaGuardia, there's a type of a chat feature where you can also email the professor. Have you tried that? You know what I'm talking about? Can you get into my LaGuardia?
Yes, I can get into my LaGuardia.
So there's this type of email thing where you can email your professor from my LaGuardia, and that email actually goes straight into, when I get emails that way, it comes straight into my LaGuardia email.
Yeah.
So I would recommend to try that today. If you're not successful, if you still don't hear from her by Wednesday's class, let me know and I'll email her on your behalf and try and see if I can't help you. Okay?
Yeah, I have her one time every week on Tuesdays.
Oh, so then you can speak to her tomorrow.
Yeah, I can try.
What do you mean try? Like it's rough times,
Yeah.
guys. You gotta advocate for yourself. This is not about try. I don't want to get into Yoda mode, but you have to. I mean, there should be an option for you to at least speak to her. If she says you can't resubmit, then it's a lesson learned, and we'll all be with our head in our hands. But I mean, you can at least make your case.
Yeah. So is it on? My question to you is on Mila Gord's email.
Sorry, what?
It's on Mila Gord. Is it the email one, the email part, or no?
I think so. I mean, I don't have my LaGuardia, obviously, because I'm not a student, but I know that I've had students email me via my LaGuardia, and it's a certain type of email that I receive.
It's
So
probably email.
if you see a face or whatever as one of your professors, you can just email her directly through Connect.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you
Try.
could. You could. It says like raise your hand, talk to your professor today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's
you
that.
could.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right. So will the midterm be, someone's asking, will the midterm be posted on Wiley Plus or Blackboard? It's on Wiley Plus. I'm going to go over that now. All right. So hopefully everybody can still see my share. I sent you guys, let me just go back into our Blackboard. Excuse me. I sent you guys an email. I don't necessarily expect that everybody saw it because it was during the spring break, but I thought for those people who are, they have been concerned about what's happening, you might want to see what is, coming up. So basically, this is on test and quiz information, spring 20. This is all the information regarding the test and the quiz. I know it looks very busy, but it's because I'm just going overboard explaining the timed, that it's a timed test and so on. And this also would have come through via email. So basically what we're saying here is that the quiz, which is 2.5% of your grade, and the test, the first test, which is 20% of your grade, will be available on Wiley Plus for you to complete from Sunday, April the 26th at 9 a.m. That's when it opens up, to Sunday. So it's a week, May the 3rd at 11:59 p.m. It doesn't mean that you have a week and you can go in and out during that week. You have to choose a day within that week time frame, or some time, some block of time where you will have for the test. Like I said, I gave you 4 hours. The test is not supposed to take 4 hours. It should take like 2 hours, but you have enough time. And then the quiz, I gave you 2 hours. It's 10 questions, 10 multiple choice questions. So these are both timed. You can't do timed. The last I checked, I mean, I don't think Wiley changed it. You can't do a timed test or a timed quiz on your phone, or frankly, I think even on a tablet. You have to find some type of laptop or desktop to do it. If you have an issue with that, please let me know. And don't be late. Please don't leave the thing until Sunday at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock because you think you only need 4 hours. That's usually the time when things go crazy. People's internet goes out. People are flustered, things like that. And everything that you try to do that's late is marked in red and it won't count. Okay, you have enough time. I know that you have other classes and all of that, but I can't. I have to be fair. Everybody's got the same amount of time, and so late submissions are not going to be considered towards the grade. Everything that's late, again, is marked in red. The quiz and the test cover chapter 13 and 14, right? So I already said when it's available. The quiz consists of 10 multiple choice questions, a combination of calculations, journal entry, and theory. So it's not just definitions. There will be calculations and journal entries that you have to know. I absolutely believe that you should do the quiz before you do the test, as the quiz is supposed to give you some indication of how you are doing, and it's kind of low stakes. Because if your quiz is if your quiz is lower, your quiz grade is lower than your test, then I will drop the quiz and keep the test. So, the quiz is kind of where you can gain points also. I mean, if the quiz grade is really high, then that will push your grade up further. But, take your time, do the quiz, at least see it's, if you're somewhere where you need to be with the material. Like I said, it's timed. You have 2 hours. It's only 10 questions. You'll probably be done in, 30 minutes, but it doesn't matter. You can take your time. Yeah, I mean, I said this already. Once you click start, you have to be done with it. So you have to be on a stable internet connection. The computer needs to be powered up. Don't be distracted. You cannot be in Wiley Plus doing the quiz and then try to log into Wiley Plus on a second browser, on a second tab to try and get to the textbook or something like that, because it will automatically shut the quiz down. So if you feel like there's something that you need to keep near you, whether it be chapters of the book or something, please don't try to go back into Wiley another way. Maybe because as soon as Wiley picks up that you've logged in twice and you're busy with a time test, it's going to throw you out. Okay. If you get thrown out because your internet got messed up, or your child came and disconnected the Ethernet cable, whatever, no worries. I can put you back in, but often the reality is that when I put you back in, we lose your work. Okay, so don't aim for that as a fail safe. They can't always preserve all the work you've done up to that point. You have 3 attempts per question. There's only 4 options per question. It's A, B, C, D. So unfortunately, if you're just going to guess, your point potential is going to drop. By the 3rd attempt, you're down to 60%. Because I mean, by the 3rd attempt, you've almost guessed all the answers. So there has to be a penalty, some penalty built in. And that's how that piece works. So try to get to the right answer within, attempt 1 or 2. The quiz will auto submit on May the 3rd at 11:59 p.m. So even if you are still busy with the quiz or the test at 11:59 on May the 3rd, you may be thinking that you're still able to do the work. You are left in there. Wiley won't kick you out of the system, but anything that you do after 11:59 is going to be in red, and I'll see it and it will be late, okay? Because it's auto submitting the things that you've completed by 11:59, and anything that comes afterwards, if you're still in the system, is not going to count. Questions on the quiz?
Professor, this is Debbie once again. I sent her 2 emails via my LaGuardia. If I don't have a reply back or something, I could just let you know by like next week maybe.
Yeah, that's fine. That's
okay.
Fine. And any other questions on the quiz? Anybody? Are we clear? I'm assuming no news is good news if no one's asking me anything. For the test, again, we know it's 13-14. Same dates that it's open. The test consists of 10 multiple choice questions, also a combination of theory, journal entries, calculations, and 7 exercises. The exercises are similar to the homework and textbook examples. Now, what often happens is people, don't manage their time properly. They start with an exercise and they just stay on that exercise to try and, perfect it or whatever. Please be mindful of how you are spending your time. You do have 4 hours, which means you'll probably be able to do everything. But sometimes, people will contact me in a panic and say, I ran out of time. I can't add more time onto the test. At that point, you need to think about how you're spending the time on each question. I'm even telling you which questions are coming so that you can study properly. So you have 4 attempts at each question. After the second attempt, you will have access to account names in the drop-down. So in the first attempt, you're trying to just remember the account names or look at them from, if you have the homework questions near to you or the textbook or whatever. I'll take off 5% once I prompt you, or once you are prompted with the account names. The reason being that under normal circumstances, we'd be in a class and you would have to write down the account names yourself, right? So that's a little bit of a support. After the 4th attempt, so the first attempt, you get everything right, no points deducted. Second attempt, you'll get help by them showing you the account names. Only 5% dropped. After the 4th, and then if you do the 3rd attempt, still no points lost. After the 4th attempt, there is another drop in your score, so you get down to 80%. if you chose to see the account names. I think on the second attempt, you can choose not to see the account names, at which point you can still maintain, the possibility of getting 100%. Why am I doing this? Because you might say, why can't we have unlimited attempts? One, because you actually need to study for the test, as opposed to just thinking it's open book, so you can go in and just write, answers and it doesn't matter, and you can just keep going and do, 25 attempts on one question. Also, if it's unlimited attempts, you will run out of time, and you probably would not actually get the amount of points that you could get if I didn't limit the attempts. So don't go too crazy with saying, well, I'll just take all these attempts and whatever. Try to study as if you were writing the test closed book. That's one of the the things that I've learned in I'll just give a sidebar here that I've learned in all of my studies. And I mean, I studied for many years, both overseas and here. Also went to Baruch for my master's and all of that. Those people were thinking about going to Baruch. When someone says it's an open book test, you have to be very careful. You basically have to study as if it's a closed book test, and you're just going to maybe go into the book to check one or two things, because you will run out of time if you think open book means that you don't have to really study. That's absolutely not what it means. When I was in the master's class for taxation at Baruch, it was open book, but if we had to actually spend time looking in our books, we wouldn't be able to finish the test. So that's what I'm writing about here, right? Don't spend too much time paging around. Try and see if you can work on these questions a number of times before you even do the test, so that you can feel more confident, and maybe just check one or two things in your book if you have to. So the exercises here, the first one will be a stock issuance with journal entries, a ledger, and a balance sheet, very similar to problem 13-1A. So there you have the reference. And remember, I'm going to go over the chapter 13 homework with you, so we'll go over that now. The second one is a treasury stock purchase and sale, which we've also been through. This might sound unfamiliar because it feels like it's been a long time. Then you've got a cash dividends declaration and payment. So that's part of chapter 14. A stock dividend declaration and payment, also chapter 14. Remember, these two chapters have a lot of small topics. That's why this is so busy, why there's so many things listed here. Then allocation of dividends between preferred and common stockholders, right, for 3 years, and the declaration journal entry. This is, you have a homework like this in chapter 14. It's basically the same thing. Then you've got a retained earnings balance calculation, which is part of what we still need to cover in chapter 14, and then an income statement. All right, so now you ask, well, is this normally what we would have had maybe in class? This seems like a lot of work. These two chapters are very full of topics. So unfortunately, this test has, a number of exercises, but some of them are going to be very small. It's not huge, big things. It's like, these are the 4 things that happened in retained earnings. What is the balance, and that's like that's the sum total of what that calculation is. So although it's called exercise, some of them are exercises that only have 2 or 3 lines of information. Questions on the test?
Are you going to be able to review all this the week before?
Am I going to do what?
Do like a test with all of us. Like, we just do each example all together again, just before the test week?
So okay, so what so today I'm going over this. I mean, I was looking at our setup yesterday, again, to just make sure that we have the right amount of time and so on. So today I'm going to go over the homework for chapter 13, which is going to form a type of review, right? Because I'm literally going through each question that you had for homework and going through the solutions and making sure that people don't have any, any follow-up questions. Then for chapter 14, even though the homework is technically only due on Monday, April the 27th, and the test opens on the 26th, I doubt that anybody is actually gonna start going, you know, big guns on the 26th already with the test. So probably what I will do on the 27th is just go through the whole thing, you know, for chapter 14 again. If people are worried and that seems too late, I can also go over, you know, chapter 14 on the 22nd, but it may not be as helpful because I don't, you know, some people may not have completely attacked the homework for chapter 14. So what I can commit to is to the review today for chapter 13. I can also commit to answering questions in the office hours. And then I can go over a review of chapter 14 on Wednesday, you know, so that people can, especially because we had the spring break in between, people can feel a little bit more comfortable, and then maybe a little bit on the 27th. I just have to always be mindful because we still have more work to do. So theoretically on Wednesday, I'm supposed to start with chapter 15. So the way the syllabus is written is not built in that there's hours and hours of review, but I'm gonna try to make that a possibility to at least have a total of maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours of review for 13 and 14 combined. How's that?
Thank you, Professor.
It's okay. And then I did, you're under no obligation to do any of this. I did, you know, post some extra questions if people just feel like doing extra questions. I don't know who is going to have time to do that, but you never know. And then the other thing that I wanted to just bring to your attention is that I did put up, and this was like at the time when spring break started, I did put up the entire back of the chapter solution for chapter 13. So if people are still feeling you know, like I don't know if I'm able to do all this stuff, I'll show you what I mean, right? So I shouldn't have gone in there. So if you go to, you know, the chapter, sorry, the bugs are here now. So if you go, like for instance for chapter 13, right, when we go in, let's just say we go here. Right, so you see how it says end of chapter homework material over here? So if you click in that and you go, let's say you start with brief exercises, this BE 13-1 and so on. I mean, you can start anyway. You can go to exercises also. What these solutions are is the solutions to all the stuff that is being asked over here. So let's say we were assigned 13-4, but you also wanted to try 13.5. You can try 13.5 and then you go to the solution and you'll be able to see if your answer is correct or not. Okay, so that's up by the time that the 14 homework is due. I'll put it up for chapter 14 also. Just again, because some people prefer to practice some, I guess, examples that they haven't seen yet. The last thing that I'll say, although I think I discussed this previously, is on the due dates and assignments page, you have all the dates when everything is due, so you can mark your calendars. Here's the things that are most pertinent, obviously, is chapter 14's homework, which has been available, you know, from the start of the semester, is due. I put it as the 27th just because in case people still have questions on that day, they can ask me during class or during office hours. And then the quiz and the tests, like I said, they open on the Sunday, the 26th. If you're feeling really confident, you can already do it on Sunday, but you have the whole week until May the 3rd. So you can still ask me questions during office hours or during class. And after that, we get into the last 3 chapters that we're doing, 15, 17, and 18. I shifted the final exam due date by a few days just to give some more breathing room to everybody. Any other questions on the test, the calendar, solutions, anything like that?
Yes, Professor?
Yeah.
So I know you gave us a list of topics for the exam. Is it possible you can give us like an example from each of like the classwork assignments for 13 or 14 for like each topic? Like,
Yeah, it's bit. I can do that. I can write it down next to you if that will be helpful.
yes, please.
But it won't only be classwork, because remember the classwork examples are pretty small. I'll try to do the write the similar classwork and homework. How's that? Just so that you
Yeah,
can
that
also
works.
refer to because I think I'll be more inclined, if I were you, to focus on any homework questions that are similar, because they're a little bit more comprehensive. What happens with the classwork questions is that they're broken down quite a bit so that I can teach you building blocks, and then the homework is the whole thing. Okay?
Okay, that works. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to make a note here that I have to post the classwork and homework similar questions, names, right, of the similar questions. Anything else, guys? That's a good point. Thank you. Who was that talking? I can't.
Tiffany.
Tiffany. Thanks, Tiffany. Anybody else with anything? All right. So so that was, you see how quickly the time goes. That was 45 minutes of admin, right? But necessary admin. So what we'll do now is actually, I think our best bet now is to go over the homework of chapter 13 so that people can ask me any and all questions that may exist. You can obviously feel free for me to give you a minute if you need to log into Wiley or something like that. But I will also I'll be going through the questions on my screen here. I recognize that everybody doesn't have the same numbers, right? Because the system uses an algorithm to give everybody different numbers, but the process and the logic is going to be the same. So this is the chapter 13 homework. All right, so, this is it's probably not going to take that long, but please stop me or ask. Let me check the chat window also. I haven't been checking to see if people... Oh, so just before I start, Shazid was asking, is it 4 attempts on quiz questions or test questions? It's on both, okay? You have 4 attempts on the quiz and you have 4 attempts on the test. But for the quiz, because it's only 4 options, A, B, C, D, by the time you do your 3rd attempt, you're down to a 60% potential points. And then for the test, you also have 4 attempts. Sorry, I don't know why when I'm sharing my screen, the chat window doesn't, doesn't ping me. So forgive me if I'm not answering your questions as quickly as you would like. So going into the homework here, for the first one, this is when we are transferring net income to retained earnings. Remember, retained earnings is all the net income and sometimes also losses that the company keeps back and doesn't distribute as a dividend. So at December 31, Bramble Corporation reports net income of $425,000. Prepare the entry to close net income. So you might wonder now, well, in the test, how is this going to come up? Is this going to come up just as, something small like this? How it will normally show up is actually as part of a bigger question where it will say something to the effect of, net income was 425,000 and you would have to journalize the transfer. So you debit income summary and you credit retained earnings. Remember, retained earnings is a capital account that increases on the credit side. So you are transferring the net income and that increases retained earnings. Any questions on this?
Nope.
And if you're wondering where this comes from, this was literally the first thing that we did in chapter 13, all right? And the whole point is just to show that there's a connection between net income and retained earnings. And you just want to remember the account names. Brief exercise 1303, this has got to do with the issuance of stock, right? And here you have to remember that we do have rules about how we account for stock issuance, right? When you are issuing stock, you're looking for an issue price, which basically means the selling price of the stock. You're looking to see if there's a par value, no par value, or no par value with a stated value. And then, any excess is going to go into this paid in capital in excess of par account. So on May the 10th, Sheffield Corporation issues, that means they sold 2,850 shares of $15 par value. So there's the par value that we were looking for. Of common stock, there's the name of the item that they are issuing for cash at $22 per share. So the $22 is the issue price. So if you want to calculate cash, you're going to say 22 times the 2,850, which gives you the 62,700. The rule for common stock is that it's going to be the number of shares times the par value. So it's going to be the $15 times 2,850 gives you 42,750. Where does that come from? Remember I said par value is this concept that was created years ago. It's a legal concept that was trying to, I guess, compel companies to keep a certain amount of their capital in stock so that it wouldn't be distributed, and there would still be something left over, should the company liquidate. These days, the concept has become less important, so it's not such a big deal anymore. That's why some companies can have par value, some have no par value, and some have no par value with a stated value. So we said that cash was the $22 times 2,850. Common stock is the $15 times 2,850, and the excess, the difference, goes to paid in capital in excess of par for the common stock. You can just subtract these two numbers from each other, because remember, debits and credits have to balance. Or you say the difference between 15 and 22 is $7 times 2,850 is 19,950. Any questions there?
Yes, Professor, can you run that again from the top? I just got on.
Sorry, what did you just say? You wanted from the top?
From the beginning? I just got on Wiley.
Oh, you just got on Wiley. Okay. Okay, I can go again. The first thing to remember is when we issue stock, you want to look for an issue price, which means the price at which they're selling the stuff. You want to look at the number of shares that are being sold, and you want to see if there's a par value, a no par value, or a par value. A par value, no par value, or no par value with a stated value. In this case, we have a par value. So now we know our rules from before, right? That cash is going to increase. So it's an asset, it's increasing on the debit side by the number of shares times the issue price. 62,700 is the answer there. Okay, so that's how you calculate cash. Number of shares times the price at which the shares are actually being sold. Common stock is a capital account increasing on the credit side. It's the number of shares times the par value. That's where the 42,750 comes from. All right. And then obviously, if these two don't balance, right, you need something more on the credit side, because debits and credits have to be equal. So you can subtract the 42,750 from the 62,700, or you can say the difference between the issue price and the par value is $7. Multiply that by 2,850 and you come out to 19,950. And the name of that account is paid in capital in excess of par. Is this Stephanie? Is that okay?
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. So now we have kind of the same thing here, except that it's a no par situation, right? So on June the 1st, Marigold Inc. issues 2,950 shares of no par common stock at a crash price of $7 per share. There's the issue price, there's the number of shares. So using these two numbers, you can already calculate how much cash they're going to receive. 7 times 2,950 is this 2,650. And remember, You might have different numbers, but the process is the same, okay? Journalize the issuance of the shares, assuming that the stock had a stated value of $1 per share. So again, yeah, if there is a stated value, the formula to calculate common stock is the number of shares times the stated value. So that's how come we have 2950. All right, these are rules that you need to learn so that you would be able to do the journal entries. The information is not going to come to your mind, you know, out of the blue. It's stuff that you will have to memorize so that you can get these journal entries correct. So now we know that there's 20,650 on the debit side and only 2950 on the credit side. So the difference is going to go 17,750 to the paid in capital in excess of, in this case, stated value. All right. So this is the kind of nonsense, sorry for that word, that goes on with Wiley. You have to be so careful because you might be trying to type in paid in capital in excess of par value, but remember this is a stated value. So you actually have to make the name stated value. Otherwise the system is going to keep marking the answer red. So please be careful about reading the question properly so that you know which account name you're supposed to be using. Another way to calculate this number is to say the issue price was $7, the stated value is $1, the difference is $6, multiplied by 2950 is also 17,700. Questions? Let me check the chat. Okay, no one's looking for me there. All right. So exercise 1304 A through E. This type of question is, it's, you know, somewhat repetitive, but not. It's basically doing a compilation of all the different ways in which information can be set up and also shared with you. So you have this constant number of shares that are being sold, but they're being sold under different scenarios. So Concord issued 3,500 shares of stock. Prepare the entry for the issuance under the following assumptions. Guys, when you see these things in red, I mean, now by doing that, I made it black, but when you see these things in red, on Wiley, please read them because sometimes it's telling you about how to round numbers, that you need to put a minus sign in front of a negative number, things like that. These are all small things that end up causing the system, you know, to lose the plot. If you don't do it, things are going to come up as red. You're going to get frustrated thinking that your answer is wrong, but meanwhile, it's something as simple as you didn't round or you didn't put a minus sign. So they're also telling you that credit account titles are automatically indented when the amount is entered. So you don't have to spend time trying to press, you know, the space bar to get the credit to be, you know, on the right. This is just, you know, it's classic debit on the left, credit on the right. That's why the credits are always indented. Do not indent manually. Round your answers to 0 decimal places. So don't keep a decimal here. There shouldn't be any decimals, but they're just telling you not to do that. So starting with A, the stock has a par value of $10 per share. So now you already know this is the number that's going to be used for common stock, for the common stock account, and was issued for a total of 53,500. So this question is slightly different because instead of telling you the price per share, they just give you the total amount of cash that was received. So 53,500 is the debit to cash because that's what was actually received. 3,500 times 10, right? The number of shares times the par value is the credit to common stock. And the difference is paid in capital in excess of par because you've got a par value for the stock. So yeah, the only way to calculate this number is to subtract 35,000 from 53,500 because you don't have a dollar amount per share for the issue price. For the next one, the stock at a stated value of 10, everything else is the same. So you notice how cash is the same, common stock is the same. The only difference here is that it says stated value instead of par, okay? So, you know, there's not much more to say about that. But you know, if you were working as an accountant in a company, you would have to be careful of things like account names. You can't just make up your own names, and you also can't call stuff by the wrong name, because eventually we communicate this information to users, and we have to be very consistent in our naming so that people know what's happening. So please don't dismiss this and be like, you know, do I really have to do this? This is so dumb or whatever. It's teaching you the discipline of the fact that account names actually do matter. For C, the stock had no par or stated value and was issued for 53,500. So this is showing you when there's a no par stock that everything goes to common stock, right? There can't be an excess because there's no par value or stated value. So everything just ends up in the common stock account. Very nice to be able to see all the different scenarios that you could have with a stock issuance, right? You've got a stock with a par value, you've got a stock with no par value but a stated value, then you've got a stock with no par value and no stated value. And that's how the journal entry looks. This is very similar also to the class examples that we did. The stock had a par value of $10 per share and was issued to attorneys for services during incorporation valued at 53,500. If you read the textbook, it will tell you that services during incorporation are often referred to as organization expense. So it's, you know, when you say organizing, it can mean lots of stuff, but in the context of a company, organizing means that you are starting the company, right? You're arranging things for the company to be able to do business. So this is an example of issuance of stock for services, right? So, you know, in the past, we had an example where you had used attorneys and you had an attorney fee. That's also another option. But in this case, because it was during incorporation, it's going to be organization expense. The expense is a debit. It increases on the debit side, 53,500. You have a par value for the shares. So it's $10 times 3,500 is the 35,000. And the only way to get the paid in capital in excess of par again is to subtract the 35,000 from the 53,500, right? You don't really have a dollar amount per share for the issue price. All right, so that's org expense. I'll just do the last one and then I'll take any questions or if I have to repeat anything. The stock had a par value of $10 per share and was issued for land worth. So that word is important. Worth is implying that that's the fair market value. So again, this is a stock issuance for an asset. And the rule there is that you record the transaction at the fair value of either what is given, the stock, or what is received, the land, whichever one is easier to determine. So since the stock has not, no one's saying that it's traded on the stock exchange, it's not easy to determine the fair value of the stock, because to do that, you would have to value the whole company, which would take forever and is also just an estimate. Whereas it seems that someone has gone ahead and valued the land because we have not advertised, but worth 53,500. So we debit the land for 53,500. Common stock is the par value of 10 times the number of shares, and the paid in capital in excess of par is the same, 18,500. So what this example demonstrates is that you could almost have a series of transactions where the numbers look, you know, almost exactly the same, but because of the different scenarios, you have different account names that are implicated. Questions there?
No, thank you, Professor.
All right, so if you're struggling with stock issuance, anybody, I would highly recommend reworking something like this a few times to make sure that you understand how it goes. And remember, if it was preferred stock that was being issued, all that changes is the name, right? The name preferred stock goes in wherever you see common stock. Let me check the chat. While I check the chat, if anybody has questions, let me know. So brief exercise 1307, this is a Treasury stock example. Remember, Treasury stock is coming in the test as well. So you want to be sure that you know how to handle this. The critical issue with Treasury stock is that you ignore par value and we use the cost method, right? Cost method meaning that whatever it cost us to buy back the stock, right? Because remember, Treasury stock is the company's own stock that it is buying back. Whatever it cost us to buy that stock, that is what we record the Treasury stock at in the financial statements. And then when we sell the Treasury stock later on, the amount that it goes out at is also at the cost, right, that was previously paid for it. So in these questions, you might see things to do with par value and so on. Please just remember to keep these topics separate in your mind. Like I said, chapter 13 and 14 are tough because there's many small topics. You have to remember that with Treasury stock, you are looking at the cost. And in this case, it would be $10 per share as opposed to par value. Okay, that's the critical thing to remember. And so on July the 1st, Concord Corporation purchases 490 shares of its. So again, when you see this type of language of its, then you know the company is buying its own stock back. So you should be looking at a Treasury stock journal entry. Remember, Treasury stock is part of capital. It's part of stockholders' equity, but it increases on the debit side. So this is all in your notes. So it's called a contra stockholders equity account because it is a stockholders equity account, but it increases on the debit side. So it's basically the opposite increase as all the other equity accounts. So it's 490 shares of its $6 par value common stock. There's the par value thrown in. There's the word common stock thrown in for you to possibly get confused. But you remember I said, don't worry about this because you are looking for Treasury stock as the name, right? That you'll use at a cash price of $10 per share. That's the cost. And so then on September the 1st, it sells 240 shares of that stock at $13 per share. So when we buy the stock, it's the number of shares times the cost is what we debit to Treasury stock. And the same thing is is credited to cash. We credit cash because we are paying cash, right? So cash is an asset going down on the credit side. That's the purchase. Notice that there's no paid in capital in excess of anything here because you're just buying the Treasury stock and you're paying cash. Everything is being recorded at cost. When you sell the Treasury stock, you sell 240 shares at $13 per share. That's 3,120. So the cash is the number of shares times the selling price. The Treasury stock, however, is the number of shares times the cost that you initially bought it at. So 2,400. You cannot take the Treasury stock out at the selling price because remember, you put it in at cost. So whatever it went in at is what it needs to come out at. So 240 times 10 is 2,400. Of course, these two things don't balance because there's a $3 excess. So that $3 excess times 240 is the paid in capital from Treasury stock of 720. This question normally gives people problems on the test. So please ask if you have any, if you want me to repeat anything.
Can you repeat the last step, the paid in capital from Treasury stock?
Yeah, sure. So you understand that the cash is going to be 240 times 13, right? Because it's the selling price. And you also understand that the Treasury stock has to go out at the same cost that it came in at. So it's 240 times the $10 is the 2,400. So now you have a problem because on the debit side, you have 3,120 and on the credit side, you only have 2,400. So you can either just deduct the 2,400 from the 3,120, which gives you 720. That's the excess, extra money that we got, and that's called paid in capital from Treasury stock. Or you can say, it's $3 extra, right? Because 13 minus 10, and so it's 2 times 240 is the 720.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know what I just did there. Yeah. Is that helping a little bit?
So basically, you're taking the cash and you're subtracting the Treasury stock to get the
Yeah,
capital.
yeah. The easiest way is just to balance the journal entry. Exactly.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions?
For September 1st, how do you get the cash?
It's the dollar amount that the Treasury stock was sold at. You see it says sold for cash of $13 per share times
Okay.
the 240 shares.
Got it.
Other questions? All right. So this again, like I said, for some reason, this is always a sticking point for people. Please be aware that you should practice this a few times. And practicing doesn't mean reading the question and reading the solution. Practicing means, looking at a question, and you can see what the questions are, right, from your textbook. So you can even look at the question in the textbook without seeing the solution, or cover the solution and try to do the answer yourself. There's very little to be gained in accounting by just reading questions and reading solutions, because once you actually have a blank sheet in front of you, you suddenly realize that you actually don't know where to start, right? So please, when you study, treat the questions as if they're in a test, and you have to try to remember as much as possible of the solution, and then you can actually mark your answer to see if you got it correct. All right, so exercise 1311 is a partial balance sheet, and what they're asking you to do is to prepare the stockholders' equity section of the balance sheet. So that's the whole thing, right? All the paid in capital, all the retained earnings. If there's treasury stock, you have to subtract that, and so on. I didn't give you, in the test, I gave you a question that looks like problem 1301, which has a small balance sheet, but I didn't give you in the test a question that is just a balance sheet. But since you do have a balance sheet in one of the test questions, remember I told you that you're welcome to have that in the textbook. There's an illustration that shows how the stockholders' equity section of the balance sheet looks, so that you can use it to guide your work. Remember I said that if we were in class together, I would have given you a template with all the account names, and you just have to put the numbers in, because my aim for you is not memorization, because if you were working in the real world, you would have the prior year balance sheet to refer to. The aim here is to understand the logic of how these accounts are set up and which numbers need to go to each account. So, word of warning again, when you go into doing the test, make sure that you have a reference sheet of a balance sheet, just so that you don't get stuck because you can't remember a line item that I would have given you as a template if we were in person anyway, okay? So they're asking for the stockholders' equity section. So the following accounts are arranged alphabetically. Arranged alphabetically also then means that this isn't necessarily the order that they should go in the balance sheet. Common stock as a $5 stated value, and that's the amount, and it goes through paid in capital, preferred stock, retained earnings. So the first heading here, obviously they're asking for stockholders' equity, so that's the heading. Paid in capital is referring to the amount of capital that came from the outside in, so this is what people invested in the business, as opposed to retained earnings, which is the capital that is generated by the company, right, from the inside to eventually possibly go out in the form of dividends, right? So paid in capital, another heading. Capital stock is also a heading, right? And capital stock is referring to preferred stock and common stock specifically. Preferred stock is listed first because it has preference in all things, including dividends and liquidation. So it will always be listed first. Notice how Wiley does not ask you to put any of these features into the name box here. So please don't bother to do that. And if you do it, I don't know if the system might try to mark it wrong. You just need to put the name of the account. I think that's all that the system can cope with. All right, so preferred stock, it's the same 550,000. You didn't have to do anything. You're just arranging numbers here. Common stock, you look up there, 1,715,000. The total capital stock, again, it's the combination of the preferred stock and the common stock. So that's where this 2,265,000 comes from. It's these two numbers together. Questions up to there? All right. Then we've got the additional paid-in capital, which is all the excess. This is, again, just a heading. Just like capital stock was a heading, additional paid-in capital is a heading. So no number needs to go there. So then you put the preferred stocks excess first, paid-in capital in excess of par preferred stock, because, again, preferred stock is always listed first. 282,000 coming straight from the question. And then the paid-in capital in excess, not of par, but of stated value, reading the questions carefully, is 947. So the total additional paid-in capital, these two numbers together, 1,229,000. Now, the total capital stock and the total additional paid-in capital becomes total paid-in capital. Remember, this was the heading at the top over there. So those two numbers together will give you the 3,494,000. So that's the hard part done at that point. Now you just plop in the retained earnings, 1,050,000 goes in there. Total paid-in capital and retained earnings. See how many headings and subheadings there are? Enough to drive you crazy, which is why I said when you're doing the balance sheet, even for the test, make sure that you have some type of model near or next to you so you don't go crazy trying to type in words and then it tells you that the answer is wrong. So the total here is the 3,494 plus the 1,050,454,400. Remember, treasury stock is a subtraction. It's a contra equity account. It's kind of like how we subtract accumulated depreciation from our assets, or how we subtract allowance for doubtful accounts from accounts receivable. So you have less the treasury stock. The number is coming straight from here, 132,000. Notice that it is a negative, and most likely I skipped over it. Well, it doesn't say, it just says that do not provide the descriptive information. Probably they would have accepted, yeah, they would have accepted positive or negative, because it says less. If your number is positive, they will also take it. But for some of the stuff, they specifically tell you to put a minus sign. And so the 4,544 minus the 132 gives you the 4,412,000. And that number is total stockholders' equity. Questions there? All right.
That's the only question that took me like over 20 attempts to do it, because it was so hard for me to like understand the whole process.
Yeah, the balance sheet in general is, especially in accounting too, the balance sheet in general is something that takes a lot of practice and a lot of time to understand. And then there's also the added complication with all these headings and subheadings, and if you put total stockholders equity instead of total paid in capital and retained earnings, then the answer is wrong, so I totally understand what you're saying, and I'm empathizing with you, which is why, your statement, it's a word of warning, just like I've been giving, that people need to, when they get ready to sit down for the test, please sit down with some type of balance sheet template near to you, so you're not going nuts at, doing 20 attempts on something that it's not easy to remember all the stuff, which is why I give a template in the class. I also don't think it's necessary to memorize every single name. It's just that you need to understand what the names mean so that you know which numbers go where.
Yeah, because that's what was happening to me, because sometimes what would happen, I would have the calculation right, but I would have the account wrong. So
yeah.
it took me forever to figure out to have like both things correct.
Right. So remember I mean, people can use this. You could take a screenshot or print it out. I don't want to go out of the solutions now, but I'll try to show it at the end. There's illustration 13.1 or 13.11. I can't remember, the one that I worked through with you guys many times in the book. There's an illustration that has a full balance sheet as well. So either way, you should be able to find the help that you need through using either one of those as a template. All right. This question is similar to what's going to be on the test. So please, pay careful attention here. Ayaya Corporation was organized on January the 1st, 2020. So it just started, right? So that means there's no beginning balances in any of the accounts or anything like that. It is authorized to issue 10,000 shares. That just means that's what the number of shares that it's allowed to sell. That doesn't necessarily mean that those are all the shares that it did sell. In fact, we'll see as we go through how many shares were actually sold of 8%. Remember, this is just indicating the dividend percentage. So if you're dealing with stock issuance, you don't have to worry about the 8%, right? You're only concerned with the 8% in chapter 14, where you have to calculate a dividend, right? $100 par value, that's important because when they do the stock issuance, you need to know what the par value is. So it's important to read all this preamble information. And it's also authorized to issue 450,000 shares of no par common stock, but it has a stated value of $2 per share. So here you have to remember that if there's a stated value, if there's any excess, the name of the account is going to be paid in capital in excess of stated value. And it's $2. Also make a note of that, because when you do the stock issuance, you have to remember that there is in fact a stated value. Otherwise, I've seen where people don't read the stuff at the beginning, then they just assume that all the stock is no par value, and that's not the case. The following stock transactions were completed during the first year, and what this question does is it asks you to journalize those transactions. Then you do a ledger, and guess what? With a ledger, you already know this, these are all capital accounts, so every single amount goes to the credit side. Okay, there's nothing on the debit side, it's all credit balances. And not balances, all credit transactions, which you'll also see when we do the journal entry. And then the last piece is they don't ask you to do the entire stockholders equity section. They only ask you for the paid in capital section of the stockholders equity. All right, so journalizing the transactions, issued 75,000 shares of common stock for $4 per share. The cash is $4 times 75,000, which is this 300,000. Common stock is going to be 75,000 times $2 per share, right? Times the stated value, which is where the 150,000 comes from. And then of course, if you've got 300,000 on the debit and only 150 on the credit, it must mean that you still need 150,000 on the credit side, which is paid in capital in excess, not of par value, but of stated value. March the 1st, you issued 4,000 shares of, now you have to be careful here, it's preferred stock now, not common stock, for cash at 105. So cash is going to be $105 times 4,000 shares, 420,000. Preferred stock is going to be 4,000 shares times the $100 par value that we had up here, which is where the 400,000 comes from. And then subtracting the 400,000 from the cash number gives you 20,000, which is your paid in capital in excess of par, not stated value. Why par? Because it says that it has a par value. And if you wanted to calculate the 20,000 a different way, you could say the difference between the issue price, 105, and the par value, 100, is $5 times 4,000 shares is $20,000. Any questions up to there for January the 10th or March the 1st? Okay. So on April the 1st, we issued 22,000 shares of common stock for land. So this is issuing stock for assets. The asking price of the land was 85,000. That's the advertised price, but the fair value was 80,000. We know that the rule is you use the fair value of what is given or what is received. In this case, the fair value of the land is more easily discernible, so you use 80,000. So you debit land with 80,000, not 85,000, because the asking price is not the same as fair value. You got to use fair value. 80,000, it's 22,000 shares of common stock at a $2 stated value, which is where the 44,000 comes from. And the difference goes into paid in capital in excess of stated value, 36,000, so that the debits and the credits can be equal. May the 1st is the same as January the 10th, except that the issue price changed by 25 cents. So you still have cash as the number of shares times the issue price. Common stock is the number of shares times the stated value, and the difference goes into paid in capital in excess of stated value. I'm going a little bit faster because it's becoming repetitive, okay? So it's the same process. It's just a different issue price. On August the 1st, 10,000 shares of common stock were issued to attorneys in payment of their bill for services performed in helping the company organize. There's that word. So this will be organization expense of 35,000, which is what we see over here. Organization expense 35,000. Common stock is going to be 10,000 shares times the $2 stated value, which is 20,000. And the difference is paid in capital in excess of stated value. Stop me at any time if I'm going too fast or if someone is stuck. September the 1st, issued 10,000 shares of common stock for cash at $5 per share. September the 1st is the same as May the 1st, is the same as January the 10th, except that the issue price changed. So now cash is going to be 50,000 because it's 10,000 shares at $5 per share. Common stock is going to be 10,000 shares at $2 per share, which is the 20,000, and then the paid in capital is the difference, right? 30,000, $3 per share excess times 10,000 shares. Then the last one, November the 1st for preferred stock. This entry is the same as this one, except that the cash amount changed. So cash is $108 times 1,000 shares, 108,000. Preferred stock is the 1,000 shares times the $100 par value. So that's going to be 100,000. And the paid in capital in excess of par is the difference of 8,000. Any questions January 10 to November the 1st on the process? We're good. We check the chat. People's brains are probably fried from me talking through all this stuff, but hopefully it helps in the test. All right, so how do we transfer this information to a ledger? Remember, the journal is the transactions by date in chronological order where you have the debits and the credits together. A ledger is each account separate, right, on its own. So you can't combine, two different accounts in one. So when we look at the ledger, we can see that they specifically only asked us for the stockholders' equity account. So we don't have cash involved at all, starting with preferred stock. So the way you transfer this information or post the information is copy paste, right? You already decided that on March the 1st, preferred stock should be credited. So therefore, on March the 1st, preferred stock is credited, right? And then you go through your transactions and you look for any other place where it says preferred stock. Let me see that I'm not missing anything. The next one is November the 1st, 100,000. So you put November the 1st, 100,000, and then it's just a balance of 500,000. Remember, if things are on the same side of the account, they get added together. If they're on opposite sides, they get subtracted. It's okay that there's nothing on the debit side because remember, preferred stock is a capital account and all the transactions have only been a credit to this account. So it should continue to be credited. And then there's also no beginning balance because the company just started. And so the same process is followed for common stock, right? I'm not going to go through each one. I'll just do January the 10th. You have a credit of 150,000. So you have a credit of 150,000 right down to September the 1st, where you have a credit of 20,000. Same over here, credit 20,000. You add up all these numbers and it comes out to 384,000. And for the most part, if there's 2 entries for preferred stock, there's going to be 2 entries here for paid in capital in excess of preferred. And then you've got your paid in capital in excess of stated value common stock. Questions on the ledger?
It's going to be exactly the same on the test, right?
Yeah, it's the same question, basically. There's not, you know, if I write the questions myself in person, I can make it a little bit more interesting, right? But with Wiley, I have to choose from the bank of questions that they have. So it's basically, the numbers are obviously different, but it's basically the same thing. That's why I said you guys just need to study, right? Because you can actually really destroy this test because the things look the same, okay?
Professor, so this is going to be on this particular question is going to be on the exam.
That's going to be like the first question on the exam. That's why I'm going so slow through this.
Also going to be on there?
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
So is each part going to also be on there,
Yeah.
like all the steps?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you gotta really just drill the stuff so that it doesn't take you too long. Okay. This is the most comprehensive question on the test, and I put it first so that I'm not like hiding it away from you. And then when you come to the last question, it's some long-winded thing. But the problem is that people then sometimes spend too much time on it. So that's why you just want to study and make sure that you know what you're doing. Other questions? Okay. So now what goes to the balance sheet? I know this sounds super obvious, but sometimes people get confused. The balance sheet takes the ending balances on the accounts, okay? Not any of the transactions, but the ending balance. That's what you're bringing down to the balance sheet. And be careful, they asked you only for the paid in capital section. So you end it over here at total paid in capital. You don't go like this example over here where you went right down to stockholders' equity. Our one that I'm going to show you now ends at total paid in capital. So you start with the heading paid in capital. Notice that it's different from starting with stockholders. I think this is a little bit nitty gritty and kind of not great, you know, with Wiley, because a few people emailed me about this because they put stockholders equity and then it marked it wrong. But paid in capital is where you need to start just because of how they set this up. Then the next thing is capital stock. Then you're listing preferred stock because it's always listed first. Remember, you're taking the ending balance. So 620,000 is the number for common stock. The ending balance over here is 609,000. Total is the combination of these two numbers. Then you've got the heading additional paid in capital. So then you list your preferred stock, right? Paid in capital in excess of par first. So that's going to be this balance, 61,000. That you put there. Then it's the paid in capital, remember, in excess of stated value for the common stock. 421,750 is the ending balance. These two numbers get added together to give you the total additional paid in capital at 482,750, and then that gets added to the capital stock to give you total paid in capital of 1,711,750. Questions on that? All right, so that's the end of the homework explanation. I think we can take, let's just take 10 minutes here. I think everybody just needs to have a brain break. So we'll come back at 12:11 per my clock. I will be gone for maybe 3 to 5 minutes, and then I'll be back if people still have questions about this, okay? Take a break. Don't worry, I'm not giving you work. I'm trying to just give people community, if that's what.
Oh, I thought it was related with some class, and I was like,
No,
what?
no. Imagine you're like, oh my word, another thing that I have to do. No, this is just
No.
this is just in case you maybe just want to. I mean, with a Zoom call like this, you could even have it playing in the background, and just ask a question in the chat window or something. It's just in case you maybe want to connect with peers. Who have some experience with online classes, who maybe can give some recommendations and stuff. That's really all it is. So absolutely no obligation at all. Remember also today at 1:00 is my office hours. If there's something that you want to discuss, there's the call in information is on Blackboard. So you're also welcome to come to that or not to come to that. I recognize that you guys have a lot going on. You can also just email me if you have questions. So we have to carry on with chapter 14, and we basically have like I would say 3.5 topics left, and they're at least one of them is really quick, and the others will maybe take a little bit more time. So hopefully you still have your chapter 14 handout somewhere. If not, remember you can just go to Blackboard and pull it down from the materials. I'm not gonna revisit cash and stock dividends right now because we just finished up with that. I can revisit it on Wednesday when, like I said, I can set aside some more time for reviewing once we actually finish the material. So the topics that I was referring to that we still have to do is one of them is stock splits. The other one is calculating retained earnings balances. And then the last one is the income statement preparation and presentation. And why I said there's a half is that there's just some ratio analysis, which I'll show you, that forms part of the end of this chapter. It's okay if you didn't understand anything that I was saying because we're still going to learn this. So the first piece here is the stock split, and it's as the name implies, right? A stock is, so let's say I have one stock or share in a company. The company may then decide to split that stock into 2, into 3, into 4, whatever the case may be. They are allowed to do that. So what does that mean for me? Well, and I'll actually show you an example. Okay, let's just get rid of this. That in 2014, which feels like ages ago, Apple did this. They might have done it more recently also, but we'll just go for this one because the numbers work out a little bit more easily. So in 2014, Apple decided that they wanted to split their stock. At the time that they were thinking of doing this, the stock was trading at almost $700 per share. All right, so let's just make this number $700 per share. And what Apple did was they split the stock into 7 pieces. So for every one stock that you owned, you now owned 7 stocks, right? So if you have one stock for $700 and it splits 7 ways, then you're going to end up having 7 stocks for about $100 each. Make sure that you understand that, right? So it's really just, it's kind of boring, basic math. Sorry, I think I clicked on something by accident. So yeah, in the end, why would you do that, right? Because it seems crazy. Like, why would, if you have a stock that's trading at $700 per share, why would you split it 7 ways so that it ends up only trading at $100 per share? Does anyone want to take any wild guesses as to why a company would do that?
To raise up their stock market?
Well, you're on the right track, but can you explain to me what you mean by the stock market?
Like to, like, let's say if they're putting it for $10 and then a lot of people will buy it, so it will go
Yeah.
higher
Yeah,
in
you're
demand.
totally right.
Make
So
more
it's
stocks
almost like they're
available
putting
for people.
the shares on sale. Yeah. Do you think that it changes anything for the people? So if I had one share of Apple for 700, should I be upset by this, or do I still own the same dollar amount in Apple?
I think you still owe the same dollar amount.
You
Yes.
do. So you would have had one share for 700. Now you've got 7 shares at 100 each. It's still the same dollar amount, right? That I am owning. So no one is being cheated of anything. And to the point that was made, this is exactly it. The company does this to make the shares more marketable, because they're saying, you know, if someone wants to invest in our company, they would have to have $700 just to buy one stock, which is really a barrier, right, to entry, a barrier to investment. So instead of keeping the price so high, we're going to split the stock so that we can make it more marketable. We could have more people owning the stock. And if you look at where Apple is traded today, $279, right? And I mean, I know all the stocks have taken a beating with COVID and so on. But I mean, if you look at $279, so if you just had bought one stock after the stock split, because now you were able to afford it, you could buy it for $100. You've almost got 3 times the amount of money now. That means the stock price has grown by so much in a mere 6 years, and also, of course, bearing in mind that it was probably trading a little bit higher. Let me see. Yeah, I guess over here, but you know, for the most part, it was over 300 at one point, but because of all the chaos that's going on in the markets, so you would have actually, you know, had, if you put in $100, you got an extra $200 basically pure profit. So Apple ends up making the stocks more marketable. More people are buying the stocks. There's more stock available to be bought, and so in the end, the price is actually growing even more. So you know, that's a stock split. There are other. I think I showed you before the Berkshire Hathaway stock. This is Warren Buffett's company. This is the price for one stock. They refuse to split it. You know, he just says that he either can afford to invest in the company or not. He kind of doesn't care. So this is not a very marketable stock, okay? Because you could, you know, buy a small apartment somewhere with the amount of money it takes just to buy one share in the company. So, you know, this would be the type of stock that you would think would be prime for splitting, but it hasn't split. Apple has split. You know, if you look at like an Amazon stock, $2,400 for one share, they haven't split either. So it's very difficult to invest in something like this, right? If you're just a regular investor. So the benefit of a stock split is that, you know, you end up making the stock more marketable, and likely the price increases over time anyway, so everybody's benefiting. And so what is the result? Obviously, there's an increase in the number of shares outstanding. If these shares have a par or stated value, that will also change, right? Because if you look at this example, in a 2-for-1 stock split, one share of $10 par value stock is exchanged for 2 shares of $5 par value stock. So not only does the market price change, right, like it did with Apple, it went down, you know, by 7, it divided by 7. Also, if they had a par value or stated value, that would also have to divide by 7, because you have more shares that were issued. So everything on the books has to stay the same, right? The balance in common stock has to stay the same. There's no extra capital that is being raised, so therefore the par or the stated value has to drop. The purpose of a stock split, as we said before, is to increase the marketability of the stock. It doesn't require any journal entries, so there's good news. You don't have to make any journal entries for the stock split. I can hear people falling off the call, so I just want to make sure that I have everybody's attendance. Forgive me for the interruption, but I did take attendance, but I also felt like I heard people joining late, so I just want to make sure that I give everybody the benefit of having been on the call. 1 second. Sorry, did someone say something? Were you talking to someone else? Sorry. Okay, I got it. I think I got everybody that was on this call, because at one point we were at 28 people. All right, so that's the stock split. So what do you need to know for a stock split? You need to know, like we showed with Apple, that the price of the stock in the market is going to go down, that it's because they want to make the stock more marketable. So it's almost like they're putting the stock on sale. And then also that if there's a par value or stated value, that it will obviously change based on the stock split. But again, there's no journal entries that we need to do for stock splits, because there's no change to the dollar amounts on the books. There's just an increase in the number of shares outstanding. Any questions there? All right. So that's the end of stock splits. So the next thing that we just need to talk a little bit about is retained earnings. And, you know, we have a limited amount of time, so I'll just, you know, I'll talk through some of this.
I have a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Other than like increasing the market, the marketability of the stock, what is the benefits for the company?
I think, yeah. So I think increasing the marketability of the stock is a huge benefit already. Even if it's the only benefit, for some of them, it would still be worth it to do that. I'm trying to think if there's really anything else that is major. Yeah, I don't know that there's much else that we can argue in, you know, in terms of benefits for the stock split. I mean, there's a concept called market capitalization, which is, you know, kind of like a big deal. It's basically the number of shares times the market price per share. You can see over here for Apple, it's 1.2 trillion. Apple is one of the companies with probably the biggest market cap in the world. So, you know, as an aside and maybe an additional benefit is that if the company knows that they are increasing the marketability of the stock, eventually that's going to cause the stock price to go up, which eventually causes the valuation of the company to go up as represented by market cap, which could also then be beneficial in terms of making any deals, you know, buying other companies.
So basically it's all about reputation?
I wouldn't say that it's just about, I mean, to some extent it's reputation, but remember that this is translating into opportunity, right? So,
right.
Yeah, so you could say, well, now I would be able to borrow more money or something because, you know, I'm just giving examples. My market cap is so much higher, or now I can really compete with other companies, or now I can really go after, you know, buying another company, but buying it by issuing, you know, stock to the investors of that other company because I have more shares floating around, etc., etc. There's also the possibility, I mean, I think this is possibly a little bit minor, because we don't change ownership percentages, but it could be that the company benefits from increasing the number of shares that are available. And if at any point there's any type of, someone's trying to do a hostile takeover or something like that, the company would actually be able to go out and buy as many shares as possible to try to prevent that. That's kind of a stretch, but that's something that I could see, if it was a very specific set of circumstances, might be a way to prevent that. I
Or
hope
is
that
more
helps.
capital to play with.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, for what I'm understanding is that all the stocks that are sold outside the company, they are all in the hands of the
Of
people
other
who are
people.
buying it, right? Of the market.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't affect inside the company.
Yeah, but it does. In
It
many
does
ways.
for what you're saying, right?
Not journal entries. Not journal entries.
Not in cash,
Right.
not in terms of money.
No, it can, because, for instance, bonuses can be attached to stock price. Remember the earnings results that companies give. So if Apple says, we made $1 bajillion more than we expected, the stock price goes up, and therefore people's bonuses may go up. So it's an indicator often of something that will tangibly affect the people who are in the company. You are correct that there's not going to be a journal entry when people are buying and selling the stock outside. Absolutely, that's true. But we can't, sorry, this is my notification. But we can't discount the fact that the stock price is a massive contributor in terms of decision making, in terms of people's payouts, in terms of strategic decisions for how to run the business. So, if you can separate those two, ideas, that yes, there's no journal entry to be made for a stock split, there's no journal entry for changes in the stock price, but certainly whatever is happening with the stock price is impacting the company, whether through payments to the the CEO, CFO, etc., or whether through other types of strategic decision making that has to take place.
So it has more of a indirect.
Correct. In the indirect impact. Although, as I said, with the market cap thing, as the market cap of Apple goes up, it does make it a bigger and bigger player in business. And as you know, from, if you follow anything to do with the tech sector, often companies are trying to buy each other out, because of new technology, et cetera. So the bigger you are in terms of your, the size, maybe as measured by market cap and the amount of cash you have on hand, is going to help if you want to make those kinds of moves.
The market cap, repeat again, what is the market cap exactly?
Yeah, market capitalization. This number over here, the 1.22 trillion, is the number of shares that are outstanding multiplied by the stock price.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. So as the stock price changes, so if you think about Apple, right? 6 years ago, they were trading at under 100 after the stock split, and now they're trading at 280. They were trading as high as 300 and something. So their market capitalization basically tripled in this time, right? Which makes everybody better off, whether directly or indirectly.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem. This is very interesting questions. So thank you for asking that. So the other piece that I'll just say this, I'll maybe go quickly through retained earnings, and then we can call it quits for today, because I'm sure everybody's heard enough of my voice for the day. So for the retained earnings piece of our work in chapter 14, it's not anything too outrageous. It's basically, we're just looking at how do we calculate the ending balance on retained earnings. So in the past, and I see my notes are still somewhat from the past. In the past, the book used to actually, and I mean, some companies do this, they used to actually propose doing a retained earnings statement, so a formalized, statement for the calculation, but now they've moved towards just doing the calculation itself and not necessarily presenting it in the form of a statement. So when you are doing this for your homework and when you are doing this in the test, all you're trying to get to is basically a final dollar amount that should be the balance on retained earnings. So I'm still referring to retained earnings statement, but you can really just think of it as retained earnings. I want to talk about what are the things that increase and decrease retained earnings, because that is what helps us to calculate the ending balance on retained earnings. All right. So the first thing to remember is that retained earnings is a permanent account, which means it doesn't shut down. It has a balance that keeps rolling 1 year to the next. Okay. So if the balance on retained earnings at December 31 is $10, then the balance January the 1st is also $10, and it will, keep rolling year over year. And then the things that increase and decrease retained earnings are as follows. For a decrease in retained earnings, if there is a loss, right? If the company makes a loss for the year, instead of net income, they make net loss, that loss will decrease retained earnings. And remember, a decrease to retained earnings is going to be a debit. Okay, so anything that's decreasing retained earnings will be a debit to the retained earnings account, and an increase is going to be a credit because it's a capital account, right? So those are the movements. So if there's a net loss, it's going to go on the debit side. I will come back to the prior period adjustments, just skip over that for now. Any cash dividend is paid out of retained earnings, so it will also decrease retained earnings. So if someone says to you, what does a dividend do to retained earnings? It reduces it, because remember, by definition, retained earnings is the net income that we held back and did not distribute. But as soon as we distribute it as a dividend, retained earnings has to go down. The same thing with stock dividends, right? Even though stock dividends represent stock that is issued, we still decrease retained earnings because we are showing that there's capital that was now distributed as stock. So both of those things are going to decrease retained earnings. And then coming up, and I'll go into this more in detail on Wednesday, sometimes, and I'm sure you can imagine this, sometimes companies make errors in their books, and the errors aren't found in the year that they relate to. They might only be found the following year. I mean, all of us have made some type of error at one point or another that we don't catch ourselves in the moment, and only later on when we look at something we're like, oh man, that was an error. So the same thing could happen with a company, right? So remember, net income and net loss are transferred to retained earnings. You saw that in the first homework example for chapter 13. So if there is an error in net income or net loss, but we'll just deal with net income for our purposes. If there is an error in net income, then it means that there was also an error in retained earnings. So let's say last year we made an error and net income was too high, which means it was overstated. Then it means that retained earnings was also overstated. So we will have to decrease retained earnings for the amount of the error. Very complicated concept, so I'm going to repeat it. Retained earnings is connected to net income, right? And they go in the same direction. Net income increases retained earnings, right? So if a company made a mistake in their net income in a previous year, and they already closed the net income off to retained earnings, they can't go back and fix the net income because the balance is now in retained earnings. So they have to fix retained earnings. So if the net income because of the error was too high, then it means that retained earnings, that beginning balance on retained earnings, is now also too high. And so we have to subtract the amount of the error from retained earnings in order to fix it. All right, so that's the prior period adjustment, which we will go into in more detail next time. And I'll just, by the same token, we also have increases in retained earnings, which represent a credit. Net income is obviously going to increase retained earnings, as we just said. And the only other thing that, for our purposes, we have to deal with increases to retained earnings is similar to what we just discussed above, a prior period adjustment. But this is an adjustment for when net income was too low. So I repeat, right? Net income and retained earnings are connected. They go in the same direction. If we made a mistake in net income that made the balance too low in a previous year, that means that the retained earnings balance was also too low. And if we want to fix that error in the current year, we will have to increase retained earnings by the amount of the error. So I will leave it there, and we can start next time with an example to see how this actually works. Hopefully I didn't scare too many people off now by ending on errors. Errors are normally a little bit tricky because in order to understand how to fix an error, you have to understand what was done incorrectly, what should have been done, and what needs to be done in order to fix the mistake, right? So it's almost like a three-part process, which is why when we go over errors, sometimes people get frustrated because you can't really short circuit the process. You need to know what happened, like what was wrong, what should have happened, and how do I fix it? And so with errors, we'll have to go through that. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share here and I'll open up the floor. If anybody wants to ask anything either about retained earnings or about anything else that went on in these 2 hours, you can ask me now. Otherwise, you can come to office hours in 20 minutes.
Professor, so we just went in chapter 14, we just went through stock splits and return earnings, right?
Yeah, and we didn't fully finish retained earnings because I still need to do some examples with you, but that's what we did. The only thing that's left to do is income statement, building income statement, and then there's, excuse me, there are two ratios, return on stockholders' equity and earnings per share, that I'll just do examples. But those are not so hard because they're basically formulas that you just have to apply. The only big meaty thing that's left is just building an income statement.
Got it. And in stock splits, did we do some exercise about it? No, right?
There's nothing really to do. I can see if I can make something up, but it's kind of, because there's no journal entry, the stock split is, you know, it's almost just like a multiple choice question. If the company has, you know, something like that, if the company has a 2-for-1 stock split, what happens to the par value? If it was 10, you know, now it becomes 5 or something like that. So I can see what I can find. I don't think I have anything because it's just, you know, almost a non-issue, but I'll look to see. Yeah, no worries. Anything else? Okay, so think so long if you have other questions. So let's just think about the week ahead. So on the 22nd, we'll wrap up chapter 14. Your homework for chapter 14 would be due on Monday, the 27th. So you still have some time to, you know, get yourself going. Remember, you don't have to leave it all till we finish the chapter because many of the questions you can do already. Some people are done already. The test opens on the 26th, but you don't have to do it that day. You can still come with your questions on the 27th and on the 29th. If you only want to take the test, you know, over the weekend. It's going to be closing on May the 3rd, which is the Sunday. One thing about the 27th, I have to have a compulsory work meeting. I'll tell you this again because this is in a few days' time, but to have a compulsory work meeting at 12 noon that day with the president and the provost of the college. So we have to end a little bit earlier that day. So I'll probably end around 11:50 on the 27th. So just bear that in mind in case, you want to ask me questions or do stuff or whatever. The meeting is from 12 to 1, so I will do my office hours that day. All right, that's all I have to say. I remind you that if you want to go to this, you are not alone. On Wednesday, April 22nd, 1 to 2:30 p.m. for students who are hanging out, just talking about online learning. The link is here in the chat window. It will disappear once we end this call. So if you want to take it, feel free to take it. Anything else? All right, guys. Well, be safe and email me if you have questions about anything. And I will see you here on Wednesday.
One?
Pardon, what?
Office hours 1?
1 p.m. Yep. All right, guys. You're welcome to leave the meeting unless you want to ask me something.
Thank you, Professor. Take care. Take care, everybody. Be safe.
Yeah,
Stay
you too,
safe,
man.
Thank you,
Professor.
Okay,
Professor.
cheers,
Thank you.
guys.
Take care.
Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Professor. This is
Yes.
Tiffany.
Hi,
I have
Tiffany.
a question. I'm not sure if you'll be able to help me. This is my last semester,
Okay.
and for fall session 2, I'm supposed to take the internship course, but due to the corona,
Wait, fall session 2 or spring session 2?
I'm supposed to take it for fall session 2.
Then this isn't your last semester. Then you mean fall is your last semester?
No, actually, it's for this semester, but session 2.
Yeah. So spring. Okay. So summer, in the summer. But because
Yeah,
of
in the summer.
corona, you're not able to do your internship. Is that what you're
Well,
saying?
I don't know. I don't know if I'll be able to do it with all that's going on. And
Who is your advisor?
I don't know, to be honest.
We have a class that you don't have to go.
Are you in a class? Oh yeah, because you're not. Are you in 121 right now? Are you in people work and organization?
I finished all of those courses. I just need to take the internship. I didn't believe that's 201 now.
Right. Do you remember who you did BTI 121 with?
Deborah?
Oh, Robinson?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I can help you with this. I can contact but did you register? So you register
I didn't register for it because they told me when I went for advisement, they told me I would need to request permission in order to take that course, like to do the internship.
Can you send me your degree works? You know what I'm talking about, like the PDF printer, or actually I can just look at your MPOL, right, and I can see you. I would be able to see, because I don't understand why you need permission if you already finished 121.
Yeah, they told me there was an office, like a business office I needed to go to.
Yeah, B327. Yeah. But yeah, I can help you with this. So Deborah,
sure.
So Deborah Robinson was your 121 professor. You're saying you are registered for 201, right?
I didn't register yet because they told me I need to get permission.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, I can help you with that. So you need to register.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll contact one of the admins to tell them that you're trying to take 201. What else are you trying to take in the summer?
That's all I need, just that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I mean, someone was just emailing us yesterday to say that enrollment is low in the summer. So I think they're trying to help any and all students who need to register to get registered. I don't know what the protocol is with, you know, obviously everybody's at home, so I don't know what the internships look like right now, and I'll certainly ask them that question also. But I'm happy to help you to register for this class. That's not a problem.
Okay.
And I think I have your info. I mean, I must have it somewhere in my roster. So
I can give it to you.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me.
23.
Yeah.
24.
Yeah.
27. 22.
Yeah. Very easy. And what's the best email address?
Let me see where I was emailing you from. I believe.
Well, for you.
Oh, my Gmail account. I can. You want me to write it in the chat?
Yeah. So I can just I'll be able to like CC you at a proper email address that you're actually checking.
Okay. Let me write it in the chat.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else with questions? Yeah. These are definitely the types of questions, folks. If I'm connected to the business department, if you're trying to register for classes or you're having an issue with something in the business department, or even a professor in the business department, you can ask me, because I will just contact people that I know in the department. Okay. So I'll do this this afternoon, Tiffany. I'm gonna tell them that you were with Robinson. Do you know which semester you were with Robinson?
Oh no.
Long ago, like a year ago or something?
Yeah, over a year.
Okay. So over a year ago you were with Robinson. Is this definitely the last course that you need to graduate, right? Because I'm gonna still check your degree works, okay? So this is the last course. You need to graduate. You aren't able to register for some reason on your own, right?
Yeah.
That's right? Okay. Okay. All right.
All right. Thank you so much.
Organize it. No problem. Okay.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.